Let's talk about Alexander Isak, shall we? Sorry, Shaka, sorry, but it looks like he will refuse to play again for Newcastle. It is the novella that has us on the edge of our seats. Will he stay at Newcastle or will he go to Liverpool? It seems like the player is pushing for an exit from St. James's Park. Jules, what's going on here? What's the latest?
To be fair, I don't think there's anything new in this. We said it, I think, when we were on the show with Shaka and Stevie, and I think you too, maybe 10 or 15 days ago, that he didn't want to play for Newcastle ever again. This is not new. Maybe he's repeated it to them, but I was told that back at the end of the season, he already said to Eddie Howe that he wanted to move in the summer to a bigger club, a club that could win the Premier League, that could win the Champions League, which is not, no offense to Newcastle, it's a great club. But right now, they're not at that kind of level. So there's nothing new there, really. The question is, who is going to win this massive power battle? Really, he's under contract, many more years of contract he has with Newcastle. So he's not in a strong position. And Newcastle can easily say, well, if you don't want to play, go with the reserve, go and sit in the stands. Because if we don't want to sell you, we won't sell you. It's just as simple as that. So I'm not even sure if Liverpool are ready for a second bid. By the way, the first one was already very high and that was rejected. I was told at the time that they were going to make a second one, but they haven't yet. Maybe they were just waiting for this kind of news to go again. But if Newcastle want to keep him at all costs, then they would keep him and he won't have the choice.
Shaka, Nedum and I were talking about this off camera, that football and how it's treated in the north of England is basically religion. Yeah. And once you upset the fan base, it's very, very hard to come back from it, which it seems like by now, I'm sure a lot of the Newcastle fans are rattled by the situation with Alexander Isak. Say he does stay, is there any way back for him?
That window is closing and closing quickly. And to Jules's point, when we were talking a couple of weeks ago and wondering whether this would go through or not, even as Alexander Isak seemed to go on strike, the sentiment was, listen, if he stays, scores 4 or 5 goals in the opening 4 or 5 games, all is forgiven. Football fans have short memories. But the more this has rumbled on, and the more certainly Alexander Isak has kind of dug his heels in, the more I think the fans, even if he starts the season as a Newcastle player, even if he scores 4 or 5 goals in those 4 or 5 opening games, I'm not sure that they'll ever re-warm to Alexander Isak. And I think a lot of that is to do with how they felt about him in May. He was regarded as a god. If we're talking footballers' religion in North East, Alexander Isak was Newcastle's god in that football team. And then to see it kind of deteriorate to this level this quickly, I'm not sure how you salvage that. From a footballing perspective, if I'm Newcastle, I've set my price at 150 million, whatever it is Newcastle decide on. Liverpool know that. You want him, you match it. If they aren't prepared to do that, then Newcastle again have to say that nobody's bigger than this football club. And for me, they then have to dig their heels in. And this makes for a really awful situation because, to Jules's point, Alexander Isak still has 3 years left on his contract. So now, if you as a club then have to make a firm decision, either somebody can go this far off rails and force you into making a decision, or you are the one who are in control of how this football club operates and make it awkward for him.
Well, much to Stevie's disgust, because Stevie wants Liverpool to sign another centre-back desperately and no more attackers. After the Community Shield, Virgil van Dijk actually said he'd like Liverpool to sign another attacking player. So, Nedum, in this situation, do Liverpool really need Alexander Isak?
I think they're light up top. And on the weekend, for example, you saw Chiesa not come off the bench. So you can see Arne Slot doesn't really fancy him at all. So the numbers that they have up there, they've changed. You know, they've lost 3 players for different reasons throughout the summer, and they've not really been able to replace them. They could argue they're closer towards their bare bones up top. So yes, bringing in somebody that's as good and established as him into that front 3 or whatever it would be a great option for them. Obviously, the price is quite high now. But listening to the way we were just talking about football just then, it's so interesting because nobody's bigger than a football club.
Yeah.
But I would argue that some of this discussion is about the finances. And with 3 years left on Isak's contract, if he was to leave, there's money that would be owed to Isak, for example. But I bet if Isak said, for instance, that, you know, I don't want that money, I just want to leave, all of a sudden, yeah, 150 is a great price, you know, or maybe 100, you can go if you want. And I think the big thing in reality here as well, it's about trust, yeah? In the Northeast, or just football in general, once you lose trust with a player, you can never really get that back. An example I use is not in the Northeast, but it's Liverpool with Alexander Arnold. He came through the academy, he was their player who was a star for them across all those years, winning Premier Leagues, Champions Leagues and so on. But the moment he started to behave in a way which the fans didn't connect with anymore, he got booed. And when's the last time we saw a player get booed? And in the next game, they didn't cheer his name. And if they had a chance to bring him back today, would they? Probably not. So now you look at somebody like Isak, who's not been there for that long, somebody who's not from the city, who's gone to train separately at his old football club. Like, he's burned the bridge and he knows that there's no coming back from this. And in fairness, he seems like he's ready to own that.
Yeah.
And I think in reality, the business will be done probably really close to the end of the window when decision-making gets a little bit more emotional. And it's like, well, in that case, I'm just prepared to go or I'm prepared to sell you.
He has absolutely put a bonfire on that bridge already, let me tell you that. Jules, but still sticking with Newcastle, it seems like they're closing in on the signature of Aston Villa's Jacob Ramsey. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, it's been a few days of negotiations between the two clubs. They wanted to strengthen that kind of position, a player that can play on the left-hand side like he did with Aston Villa, or maybe a bit more central too. He's a young player, he's an English player too, which is good. Villa signed Evan Guessant from Nice in France recently for £35 million. So that was a big investment. And if you look at all the forwards they have, and again, we don't know what's going to happen to Ollie Watkins, but for now, they've got quite a lot of players. So I think they would welcome the money that they need, to be fair, to balance their books for a player that went through the academy. So all the cash that Newcastle will spend, which should be around the 40 million mark, will go straight into the bank account of Aston Villa as profit. And again, for the money that they've spent already this summer and the summer before, is the money that they need.
Does the Ramsey mood link in any way with the Isak rumours, Jules?
Like as in Ramsey, you mean, and Isak?
Mm-hmm.
No, I think they're two very different subjects, if you want. And again, I was told today that Newcastle are adamant that Isak is not going to go anywhere and that he will come back to the club. And if he doesn't want to play, then he's not going to play. But it's a World Cup here. Let's not forget, Alexander Isak cannot afford not to play a single minute this season before the World Cup next year in the US, Canada, and Mexico with Sweden, because Sweden are very likely to qualify. I was on holiday, by the way, with John Dahl Thomason, who is their head coach. Just wanted to put that there in Marbella.
Of course.
Lovely guy.
Humble brag.
A lot of talk about Gyökeres and Isak together, as our kids were playing football with each other. But for Thomason, this would be a disaster. And for Isak, to be fair, more seriously now, Isak cannot afford not to play a season before a World Cup. So there's a lot at stake for him too, even if he stays, because, again, as the boys have explained, it's going to be a very difficult situation to manage.